Now I know you guys remember this FM2 Plus board that we recently used in a video where we built an ultra budget gaming PC and the performance was absolutely shocking. We could barely play any games at all. Well, today we're going to be giving it an upgrade and we're going to see if we can actually play a modern game on it. Now, of course, when I was doing that previous video, a lot of people said FM2 is pretty much dead now, and I think it pretty much kind of proved that as we were testing things. We barely managed to get games, even like the 2013 version of Tomb Raider, to actually play in, well, any kind of FPS performance, really. I think we managed to squeeze 30 FPS out on it in low, but a lot of that was down to the rest of the system as well, not just the CPU. The hard drive as well, which we used a mechanical drive for because it was cheap, was actually delaying everything from loading up, and it was causing us a lot of issues. So hopefully, swapping out some parts, particularly the CPU in this, it's going to give us a better chance of playing a game. When it comes to those upgrades, we do have some parts here. I've managed to pick up a new CPU for this motherboard. We're going to swap out the A6-6400 APU, and we're actually going to be installing this. This is an AMD Athlon X4 FM2 Plus, and it is the 860K. It is actually a CPU, not an APU, so we should have a better chance here, and it's supposed to be a quad core, although TechLabUK again kind of list it as a dual core with 4 threads. So I'm not quite sure if that's actually going to give us any more performance, but it is faster than the one that's actually in the board. Accompanying that, of course, we're going to be swapping out that old hard drive that we used, and we're going to be using an SSD. The drive that we're going to be using is a Samsung Evo 860, kind of matches the numbering there of the CPU, but there's no relation. This is just one that I had spare that I got out of an old system a while ago, and it's a pretty decent drive. So hopefully the upgrade of an SSD will at least allow the system to boot a lot quicker, and we'll be able to test games much faster. We're also going to be upgrading the memory in this. Last time we used 8GB of DDR3, and I don't even think it was matched speed. It was 1300 megahertz. Well, at least one stick was 1300 megahertz, but I'm not sure that it was ever running at its full speed. But instead we're going to be changing it out for this. Now this is 2 sticks of 8GB, so it's going to be a total of 16GB of DDR3, and this is 1600 megahertz, which seems about standard nowadays. I have actually attached 2 coolers to this. I did this a while ago, and it's got RGB in it, even though that's not really going to make anything faster, but hopefully the doubling up of the memory will give us a better chance of playing a game. Then of course we come to the graphics card. The GTX 450 is going to be thrown out the window, and I wasn't really sure what we should actually test this system with. There's no point going for anything brand new or high end because pretty much sure that the CPU is not going to be able to cope at all. So instead we're just going to actually drop this in and we're going to give it a go. This is an AMD Radeon RX 5600 XT. It actually lived in my editing rig for a while, but I took it out and swapped it out for an Intel Arc because they're much better at doing that kind of stuff. And I've kind of had this thing floating around for a while and I wondered what to do with it, and I thought this is a perfect opportunity. It does only come with 6GB of VRAM, but that is not going to affect the gameplay of this system at all, and it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of things we can actually get out of an older system like this. Now I do know from comments on my videos whenever doing anything in a budget range, there are still a lot of people out there that do use AM3 systems, FM2 systems, and a lot of older Intel systems. The Intel systems will actually stand much better up against this kind of stuff. We've tested that in the past. Even old quad cores from Intel would actually destroy the CPU that was in this, and probably the one that we're going to put in it. So if anybody is out there thinking about building a very cheap gaming PC on some really old parts, maybe something retro, try opting for the Intel side. I'm not even sure what AMD were playing with when they were coming up with this kind of stuff, because the performance we got out of it was absolutely terrible, even compared to some very bad Intel processors. But anyway, we need to actually put a system together to be able to test it, and for that I think that this system was very sad when we actually built it previously. It looks sad, it performs sad, so I'm going to give it a bit of a glam up. We're going to actually put this into a more modern case. We're going to give it some better looks. It's not going to actually affect the performance at all, but I think it'll look quite nice. So I'm going to put a quick system together and then we'll get on with some tests. Okay, so we got the system built and it absolutely looks fantastic. That is the beauty of these budget style cases. We recently did a video on it and it's a pretty cool case, but they are coming out at a budget price and they're perfect for when you want to glam up a system like this. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the back IO shield for the motherboard. It is around here somewhere, but I did have to install it without it for now. And that's the only real shame to when it comes to the looks of the system. I think it did actually turn out really, really nice, and giving it a nice red theme actually really gives it a bit of a pop. But apart from that, the system is running perfectly fine. When we actually come into Windows, you can actually tell that this system is not the greatest at all because it is a little bit slow. Being able to open things is a little bit slow. There's always a little bit of a delay. And even when we're running benchmarks, just like this one, which is Unigen Heaven benchmark, we can see that we are starting to get a little bit of a struggle. Fortunately for us, the graphics card though is the thing that's bottlenecking on this actual benchmark, but I'm not really sure whether that's going to translate that well into gaming. But what we'll do is we'll drop down this benchmark and we'll start a game. Now I decided to throw this system in at the deep end, and the first game that we're going to be trying now is Cyberpunk 2077. This game is roughly about 2 to 3 years old now, and it was always super demanding. It's got better over time, but it does test much hardware, and it is really testing this system now. We have a 99% utilization on our CPU, that X4 860K. And we've only got around 29% utilization on the 5600 XT. I do know that the 5600 XT has much more to give than this, but we are currently getting an average of around 35 frames per second with a 1% low of 21. Some people would say it's playable, but I'm not even sure what this game is even configured to. So let's drop into the settings and we'll see what we've got configured. In the graphics tab here, we've got the quick preset is set to low, so we can't really go much lower than that at the moment. We've also got AMD's FSR Super Resolution 2.1 enabled with an auto setting. Let's go and change that up to a performance setting and see if it makes any difference. Now we're back in game, we're not really seeing much of any difference, so the auto probably was selecting the performance section. We are still maxing out our CPU here at around 99%, as well as the GPU still sitting around that 30% utilization. Would I say that the game is unplayable? It does have stages where it becomes unplayable. Actually moving around when there's not much traffic about isn't too bad. The game doesn't look nice, I will admit. This game can look absolutely fantastic, and if you're used to that, you're not going to get that kind of experience from this kind of system. So if we'll just keep running around a little bit, as we can see, the faster we move and the more that's happening on the screen. Somebody just run me over here. Everything starts to shake up a little bit. We are losing a lot of frames here, and our frame time graph is going all over the place. So unfortunately, I don't really quite think that this game is playable on this system. I think if you are running an FM2 or an FM2 Plus system, you're kind of out of luck now for modern games like this. There's not really much that we can do with this game. We could drop the resolution to a 720p, but I don't think we're going to get that much gain, particularly with the overhead that this CPU is causing when it comes to a bottleneck. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have to try something a little bit older. Now the next game that we're going to be testing is Back 4 Blood. It's not that much older than Cyberpunk 2077, but it is a less demanding game. It came out in around 2021, so it's coming up to 4 years old now, and I would still consider it as a modern game. It isn't as demanding, like I say, as Cyberpunk 2077, but it can have a bit of a toll on a CPU, and unfortunately the CPU is the weak point in the system, and we are seeing that still, even though we're not moving around, with the stats in the corner where the CPU is currently at around 99% utilization and the Radeon RX 5600 XT is only at around 19. So I'm hoping we can get a smoother experience on this, but let's dive in and take a look. The first thing we'll do is we'll jump over to the settings. We'll take a look at our graphics settings here. We're currently running in 1080p. I'm sure that all of our testing today is going to be limited to 1080p or below. We are set AMD FSR 1 to a quality setting, so we'll leave that for now. And then when we go to the quality settings, it's currently set to ultra. I don't know why it's set to ultra, but we're going to turn that down. We're going to go for a medium setting because this game looks reasonably good at pretty much every setting, to be honest. We'll apply that, and it's going to take a while to actually load. One thing to note on this game is that it does compile the shaders at the beginning, and that takes a long time on this CPU. So if you are going to be gaming on the FM2 platform, be prepared to wait for modern games, particularly before they even start. Now that we're back in the game, we can see that actually we're getting a pretty decent performance here of around 54 frames per second on average, but it does have a slightly low 1% low of 27. This is actually walking around a room with nothing really going on, so I'm kind of guessing once we hit the enemy, we're going to actually get a very low performance here. We've already got a few stutters as we came out the door there. FPS is jumping up and down, but we'll keep going and we'll see what happens once we get lots of enemies on the screen. We're just taking the odd one out here, just into the corridors. There's not really much going on, and performance is holding up okay. We've still got around 23 FPS on our 1% lows, with our averages coming out at around 51 FPS. There's still not a lot happening on the screen though, so I can imagine it's going to really get hit once we actually get lots of enemies on the screen. And of course in this game you do get lots of enemies on the screen at certain points. But I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll drop the settings a little bit more. We'll run back to that room so we don't die doing this. And we'll drop the settings. We'll see if we can get it to play a little bit better on those 1% lows. Jumping back into the settings here, we're going to go off to our options. We're going to go to our graphics. What we're going to do is we're going to drop our FSR quality down to a balance setting. And I think what I'm going to do is drop the quality down to low as well. So we'll apply those settings. It'll take a few seconds to apply. And we'll get back into the game. So we haven't actually done much to our average FPS here. We're getting around an average of 55 frames per second, but the 1% lows have increased a little bit. We're currently getting an average of 30 FPS on the 1% lows, and the game is actually playing pretty good. It doesn't look too bad in a low preset. It still looks like a decent game. You can have a pretty good game on this, to be honest. I don't think you get much of an issue. Anybody actually using this kind of platform could get away with playing this game so far, but what I want to do is I want to actually get some more enemies going, see if we can get lots of things on the screen and see how far everything dips. Our frame time graph is going all over the place now, so it is starting to really show that it's going to dip. We've got a window here, so let's grab some of this tin and we'll put it on the window, hammer it up a little bit. We do have to fortify several windows in this bit of the game. I have completed this game several times before, but I do love to restart it now and again. We don't use this game in our benchmarks anymore, but that's mostly because we've got lots of new games that really does test hardware. I just thought it'd be really nice to try something of this age, particularly with this system, just to see if somebody could get away with playing it. I think, honestly, you could get away with playing this. I don't think you've got much of an issue. Lots of things are happening on the screen and the game hasn't just completely crashed on us. You're getting a pretty decent console-like experience here. I guess if you did drop the resolution to 720p, it would smooth it out quite a bit, so you could get away with that if you wanted to. But apart from that, it's not the best experience, but it's probably actually playable. So now that I know that you can actually play a reasonably modern game on the FM2 platform with this CPU, it does kind of play. You can get away with it if you really want to play that game. I thought we would test it on something that's a little bit older, still within the 5-year range of what I would call modern games. Something that's very well known for being extremely well optimized, and that game is Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal will pretty much run on most things. It's more or less the graphics card that will let you down on Doom Eternal, particularly when it comes to VRAM. As long as you've got around 6 GB of VRAM, the game will let you crank those settings up and you can get a pretty decent experience out of it, even with some older graphics cards, just like things like the RX 580. So hopefully our 5600 XT will save the day here. But let's jump into the game and see what kind of performance we get. Now, I really don't know what the actual developers of Doom Eternal actually did, but they made a fantastic game that runs so well on most things. Even just loading up this game took no time at all on this old FM2 CPU, so you're going to be having a good experience even before you've started the game. We are just running around at the moment. Everything is super smooth. I don't know what the settings are completely, but it does look like it may be in a medium to high settings, but let's drop over into those settings and see what we've got configured. If we just go over to our video settings now, we can see that we're in a 1080p resolution. We'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. So we are now currently running in an overall quality of medium, which looks fantastic on this system. I think we're going to leave it there and we'll just jump back into the game. Now, we are currently getting an average in this part of the game with no real enemies on the go of around 88 frames per second with a 1% low of 73. That is perfectly fine to be able to play this game at. It's going to give you a super smooth gaming experience, as well as getting near high FPS experience as well. But let's go find some enemies and see what happens to that performance when things happen on the screen. We'll just dive down here now. We've got lots of enemies on the go. We'll start killing some stuff. The system itself hasn't actually slowed down. The performance is still maintaining up at 90 FPS at the moment. I'm actually surprised, super surprised that this system is holding up so well, to be honest. We're getting a great performance out of this. If you are a Doom fan, or at least a Doom Eternal fan, you can actually play Doom Eternal perfectly fine on an FM2 system and CPU, as long as you've got a pretty decent graphics card in there. I don't think we got any warnings in the actual settings. In fact, what we'll do is we'll just head back down here where we're not going to get attacked. We'll go back to the settings and we'll see what kind of VRAM warnings we are getting. So as we can see at the top here, we are using around 3.5 gigabytes of VRAM and we've got 6 gigabytes to play with. I wonder what happens though if we turn up the quality setting to high. Can we still get a playable experience? We'll just enable those settings then back into the game, reset our stats, and to be honest, actually the performance has gone up. That's quite amazing. We're now getting nearly 100 frames per second on average with a 1% low of 76. Again, I really don't know what the developers did to this game, but it seems that the higher you turn it, the better older hardware like this is performing. But we'll find some enemies, see if it continues up like that. We are shooting stuff, there's lots of things on the screen. We are still getting a bigger and better performance out of it. I think that's absolutely fantastic of a system that pretty much cost nothing to put together. But I think that, well, the motherboard and the CPU together, the original motherboard was about £6, but that came with the old APU. With adding this CPU in here, which I paid £2 for, obviously that would make it an £8 combination. And for £8, you're going to be able to play a game just like this. It's probably just worth putting a system together like this as a Doom themed build, just to play Doom games and stuff like that. Maybe retro old school shooters or something. But I'm actually super impressed with this, and I think you guys probably are too. So there we have it. We can actually play some modern games on an old FM2 platform. Probably not the latest games, as we could see with Cyberpunk 2077. That was an absolute mess. But if we just go a little bit older, anything within 5 years old, I would actually consider as a modern game. Doom Eternal is just in that bracket. It's coming up to 5 years old now, so that obviously works perfectly fine. We've got some great performance out of a high preset there, and there's no FSR or anything turned on with that game. I don't even think there was a setting for it, so it performed exceptionally well. We could also get away with playing games like Back 4 Blood, although I think it would actually benefit from lowering that resolution to 720p. But in 1080p with a low setting, it still looked okay, and you could still get away with playing it, particularly if you're used to something like a console experience. Let me know in the comments below what you think of the system that we put together here. Are you one of those people that are still using something like an FM2 platform? If you are, I would highly suggest it's time to upgrade. Even if you did a sideways upgrade to something older on the Intel side, maybe just a 4th generation processor, it would absolutely kick the snot out of this one. So that's always an option, and you can get them for pennies nowadays. If you want to go for something even newer, even a 1st generation Ryzen processor, you can pick those boards and CPUs up for less than £50 now if you go for 1st generation. And again, it will kick the living snot out of this. If you do have a reasonably decent graphics card like this one, and you upgrade to a 1st generation Ryzen processor, you're going to see a massive uplift straight away. It's going to be like you had a whole new graphics card again too. So that would be my advice if you're sitting on something as old as this. If of course you are only playing retro style games, it's going to be perfect for you too. It still is running Windows, it's still actually gaming. You're going to get away with some pretty decent stuff. And if you wanted to glam it up like we did, it wouldn't even cost that much to do nowadays. You can get away with a nice stock AMD Ryzen cooler. They're pretty cheap nowadays, and that looks fantastic. And as well as the case here was around £65 if you go buy it new. So the combination of them two things can really transform a system. I hope you've enjoyed the video, taking a look at FM2, seeing if we could give it a bit of a boost in terms of performance with an upgrade. You guys suggested that I should do this based on our previous video, and I've actually really enjoyed doing it because I've kind of found out quite a lot about a platform that I completely missed because I was doing something else back then. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and also let me know in the comments below if there's anything else you want us to do to this system. Are there any other experiments that we can make, see what kind of things we can do? I don't think taking the graphics card any further will actually make any kind of a difference because the bottleneck was clearly the CPU on this. And I'm sure, as always, catch you guys in the next one.